Good afternoon. Today we're meeting with Chief Ainesworth, and we're going to discuss our new SOP over fire hose selection and fire streams. And hopefully we can clear up any questions that we have about the new SOP. But before we get with Chief Ainesworth, I just wanted to cover a few things coming out of Fire CE. The YouTube channel is up and running, and we are allowed to post on it now. So monthly you're going to start seeing short videos on YouTube. We have elevators, we have Encore coming out, alarm panels, and we also have apartment loads. If you have any content that you would like to see, please email me. Or if you would like to demonstrate a technique that you would like to go on YouTube for the whole city to see so that everybody can benefit, please holler at me. So now we're going to get into the new SOP with Chief Ainesworth. Chief Ainesworth wrote this SOP, and we're going to cover different lines, different selections of lines, for the type of structure that you have.
Yeah, just giving a backstory, Chief Davis tasked the apparatus committee with coming up with a policy on hose streams and hose stream selection, hose line selection. And ultimately this all stems from him wanting to make sure that we are pulling appropriately sized hose lines into structures so that we're all safer. So that's where this came from. The apparatus committee and kind of a subcommittee of that group got together, wrote this, edited this, presented it to E-staff, and then ultimately got approved. But we'd like to clear up some of the questions people are having at operations about it. So appreciate Chad taking the time to film this video and get this information out there.
All right, so there's some definitions that I would like to go over with you that maybe you could clarify. So when we're talking about big booster, red line, working fire, and small commercial buildings, can you kind of talk about what the definitions for those are?
So some of those we just want to clear up some of the nomenclature of our department. Historically, it was a big booster, was our 1 3/4 inch. I think we've kind of shortened that up a little bit to where now when we give a size up, it's this engine's on pulling a booster. Even though we know that's all 1 3/4 inch, it does add some confusion on our size up. So we wanted to make sure everyone knew big booster and booster are the same thing. Yep. Working fire, kind of all hands. Everyone on that alarm assignment has an assignment. They're all working. Alarm also knows if you're pulling a big booster and asking for a supply line, that should be automatic working fire as well. But we wanted, since we're going to use some of these terms later, we wanted to make sure we define them in there.
Now, when you're talking small commercial buildings, we're talking a structure, a commercial structure that's less than 3,500 square foot. We're talking a large commercial building is 3,500 square foot or more. And we're talking large residentials, which nowadays you can have a residential that's over 10,000 square foot easily, is over 3,500 square foot. Big box commercials, 40,000 square foot. Yesterday at one of the trainings, we were talking about one of the Amazon buildings that's up north, and the square footage on those would absolutely, it's crazy how big they are. It's a high rise that's laying flat, horizontal high rise is what it is. Over 1 million square foot, and I believe that one over there, he said, was 4 million square foot.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the one up by Hazlitt.
Okay. Yeah, the definitions here, I know there's some discussion at the stations right now. No one's going to go out there with their measuring wheel, and we're not sitting there measuring exact square footages on here. But where this comes from is understanding fire flow formulas. There's a few out there, the National Fire Academy formula, and then there's one that comes out of Illinois. They all take into account the area or the volume of the building. The National Fire Academy formula, it's probably the easiest one to do on scene. And we take the square footage of the building, we divide it by 3, and then we multiply it by the % of involvement of the structure. So for easy math, 3,600 is an easier one to divide by 3. If that building's fully involved, we need 1,200 gallons a minute to control that fire. So that's where the 3,500 kind of cutoff comes from. And it gives us an idea of how much water we're going to need. So in that scenario, 3,600 square feet, and let's say it's 50% involvement. So now we need 600 gallons a minute to control that fire. So that's where we want those definitions in place, because then the attack lines we pull, we need to come up with something close to 600 to actually stay offensive and get control of this fire. Thing on that too, on the residentials as well, we do need to probably consider large residential fires similar to small commercial, just because of the fire load that's available with all of our furnishings. And then we need to account for the available oxygen in there. These homes are vaulted ceilings, large open spaces. There's a lot of energy in those structures that can burn and give a heat release rate that may be too high of a heat release rate for just our big booster to offset those BTUs.
What is a backup line and what is a second line?
So one of the things we really wanted to make sure that was defined, because they have very tactical differences, and I don't know if that's always been something we've been really clear on as a department. A backup line, that is an additional attack line that's pulled specifically to protect that main attack line's egress path. When we get that assignment of a backup line, there needs to be an understanding of that assignment you have is in the egress path. You're protecting the stairwell if they went upstairs. You're protecting the hallway. You're protecting the area behind that attack crew, making sure that fire doesn't get above and behind them and cut them off. That assignment is really important from the chief standpoint, because we understand now we have a crew maintaining that. If you don't understand that assignment and you drift off to attack more fire elsewhere in the building, now we're getting into a totally different assignment, and that's more along the lines of the freelancing.
Yes.
A second attack line or an additional attack line, it could be third, fourth, fifth. Those are the ones where we're saying, hey, this fire is extending into another part of the structure. Let's take another attack line to that location and actually attack the fire with that. Those are some of the big differences. We need to understand when you get those assignments that they're two very different things. And there's a time and a place for both. And we need to have that professionalism of getting that assignment and that task and then accomplishing it.
Right. And now a backup line, so say they enter through the Alpha side. At any point, would you ever want a backup line coming through the Charlie side? Or would you always want it following the original hose line that goes in on the Alpha side?
Yeah, we need it following. Yes. We need it following and protecting that egress path.
Correct.
One other consideration on there too is we don't want a smaller size attack line as our backup line. If those guys are getting overrun with a 2-inch and all you have is 1 3/4 inch, well, you can see where that's headed. The math won't add up. You're not going to be able to control that fire either with a smaller attack line. So we need something that's at least the same diameter, if not larger,
correct,
really as that protective line.
Now, as far as pulling the second line, first line enters Alpha, secondary line could come in to the Charlie side.
It absolutely could. We do want to be mindful of opposing streams
Absolutely.
and the potential problems that we may have there. But with good radio communication, we can do that assignment. We also very well may have a situation where fire attack is coming in the Alpha, and take a strip retail center where we want to box that fire in. We have a Bravo 1 exposure, a Delta 1 exposure. We can have attack lines, additional attack lines coming in on either side as exposure protection, trying to keep that fire contained to one area. So we can have opposing attack lines. We just have to make sure they're coordinated.
The communication is key. Yes. So big box commercials is defined in here as a commercial structure with 40,000 or more square feet. Like what we just talked about earlier, some of our Amazon buildings up north, we're talking 4 million square foot, which is a high rise laid on its side. Can you talk a little bit about tactics and hose deployment, or not hose deployment, but hose size on that?
Yeah, so on our big box stores, and they're all over the city, not just stores, warehouses, all of these, the fire load on those is tremendous. And it's all dependent on what type of business it is. Is it, what are they storing, what do they have in there? But ultimately, they have a lot of it. No matter what, they have a lot of it. And so when we deploy attack lines in there, our best chance of keeping that offensive is to throw the biggest thing we have at it. And the biggest attack line we have available to us as a hand line is our 2.5. We have to understand though that a 2.5 can be cumbersome, but if we can get it to the seat of the fire, we have a good chance of making some good headway on that. Certainly if we can get 2 in play in there. But ultimately it's like every other fire. If we don't get the first attack line in play, then we're really behind the curve. So we really need to focus on one attack line getting in there to start with. One way we do that is we size up our building correctly, and we make sure we go in the right entrance.
Yes.
So when we are looking at these big box buildings, you could have the equivalent of a house fire inside one of those and it be no smoke showing. There's that much volume inside there to hold all that smoke in. So if you're showing up to like we're saying, a several 100,000 square foot warehouse and you have light smoke showing, you probably have a significant fire inside there that's just showing itself as light smoke due to the volume available for that smoke to fill up. So we need to make sure we pull something big in there. We can flow large water on that fire. And the 2.5 is what's recommended in here.
Right.
It may even mean that we have the first 2 companies, just like we do in high rise. We put multiple companies on one attack line to get that first one in play. So it may require, instead of that next on company pulling a second attack line, that they jump in with the first on and make sure we get one attack line in play to the seat of the fire, and then we can build off of that. Right. We can start getting some headway on the fire. We can follow that line in with additional lines and get more water flowing, but we may stay offensive if we can do that. One of the other things in there on this, when we're choosing our entrance, we would like to keep our pre-connections and our attack lines under 300 feet, ideally. We really don't want to be in a structure so deep that if an evacuation tone's given, we're having to go 400 or 500 feet just to get to safety. So ideally, we want to do a 360, even if it's driving, and choose a door where you see smoke, or maybe you see more pressurized smoke, something more turbulent. That tells you I'm closer to the seat of the fire. That's where driving 360s can really come in play. Yep. Have other companies circle the building, take a look at the Charlie side. It may not be the front door every time on these big buildings.
Absolutely. For those of you that have never heard of nozzle forward, if you'll go to YouTube, there's a bunch of different techniques on how to manage that 2.5 more efficiently instead of just sitting out there and just using brute force.
Yeah, the nozzle reaction on a properly pumped 2.5 is not much different than our 2-inch is now. There is more weight in the hose because you're carrying more volume of water behind you. But good hose management, good technique. We can flow and move a 2.5. I'm confident everyone in the fire department can do that if we practice.
Correct. So now let's discuss residential fires, the small commercial, large commercial, big box stores, and the recommended size lines for those structures.
Yeah, so residential, the big booster is our bread and butter. Fort Worth is awesome at it. It's one of the things we are really well known for is aggressive firefighting, and we're fantastic at residential fires. A big booster, if we run in the fog nozzles, 175 gallons a minute if pumped correctly. The SOP did leave room if we have some companies running smooth bores out there, so based on tip size, we still want at least 160 gallons a minute to stay with the NFPA standard of residential fire flows. But that range in there, 160 to 175, that's our residential fire flow for, like we're saying, small residences, 3,500 feet and under. We can and should be able to control residential fires with a big booster and maybe even a second big booster as a second line. And stay offensive on those.
Right. So when we're talking small commercial structure fires, we're talking 3,500 square foot or less, and the recommended size line for that's a 2-inch.
Yes. So our GPMs on the 2-inch, 250 on the fog nozzles if pumped correctly. 220 to 250, I believe, is what's in there. Again, that's if you're running smooth bores. There's some variations in your gallons per minute. But again, just based on that fire flow formula and how much fuel load is available to you in these small commercial buildings. Think of your small churches, some of your small stores, your gas stations, your reigning lieutenants. Just the fuel load that's available. The fuel packages in those type of structures, they're going to be higher than a big booster can handle.
Correct.
So when we start with that 2-inch, we have a better chance of this staying offensive. Something else on that small commercial, I think we're all really good about the fact of recognizing these, and we pull a 2-inch into those. Some of the issues I see and that the committee saw is it's that second attack line that we pull. Oftentimes we go to the truck, the next pre-connect is a big booster, and we pull that in as our second attack line. That really puts us behind the curve on our fire flows. And when that happens, we run the risk of this turning into a defensive fire because the fire's BTUs just are greater than our available GPMs at that point. So when we look at that scenario we gave of that 3,600 square foot, again for easy math, structure, and 50% involvement, so 600 gallons a minute is our target. So we start with 250, GPMs on our 2-inch, and then we make the mistake of pulling the big booster in and adding 175, we're flowing 425 gallons a minute when we need 600. That's where the problem comes into play. Yes. Whereas if we were to pull an additional 2-inch, now we're up to 500, we're a lot closer to that 600, or pull the 2.5. And now we add in a 2.5 with the 2-inch. Now we're getting up right at or very close to that 600 gallons a minute that we were looking for to stay offensive on that. So if we can recognize that early and have a good water supply that can support this, we can keep these fires in an offensive mode.
Right, absolutely. So to talk about large commercial structure fires, 2.5 and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just the GPMs that we need to control that type of fire. The other thing we need to think about too is most of us on our pre-connects, we've got 150-inch booster or 150-foot boosters, 200-foot boosters, and then 200-foot 2-inch. But these buildings are huge, and we very well may need to get 250 or 300 in there to get to the seat of the fire.
Correct.
The 2.5 provides us gallons per minute and the ability, because we carry more of it, to get that additional footage into the building. If we can get a 2.5 in play and we're flowing these high GPMs and we get a second line in there partnered with them, hopefully an additional 2.5 in there, these can stay offensive. They also provide us a tremendous amount of reach with that gallons per minute that we can protect bar joists, trusses, things where we need to cool this to keep the ceiling from coming down on us. When we flow low GPM nozzle without that reach, we lose a lot of that. It's being evaporated and we're not actually cooling the steel. And we need to get water actually on the steel to cool it and kind of freeze it, as the saying is on these trusses. That's what the 2.5 can do for us.
On a lot of these tilt walls these days, they're 50, 60 foot high. So you're on the ground, so you're shooting 50, 60 foot up in the air. So
yeah, and you know, the 2.5, like we said before, you're going to need possibly 2 crews to get that in play. But if we can get that to the seat of the fire, we have a great chance of keeping it offensive. Thermal imagers can be really helpful too, where you can kind of scout your path, looking for obstacles. Again, you're looking for shape, not always color, but you can see rack storage. One of the fires that comes to mind that I pulled a 2.5 as a first attack line. High rack storage all through it. We used a loading dock door to go in though, because we knew a vehicle pulls in there. So it was a straight shot in there. We didn't have to make a ton of turns. Had we gone in the first door we opened, we never would have made it. So we got to slow down on those a little bit, choose the right door, do a good size up, and then deploy a good size attack line in there. And we can stay offensive on those.
Right, because hose management is so big with the 2.5 and company level training, where you're out with your crews and you're working on moving that 2.5, because every time coming from high rise, every time you have a turn, that's a pinch point where someone's going to have to sit there and hump hose for you. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between the large commercial structure fires and the big box commercial structure fires?
Yeah, so one of the biggest differences is a big box, for the most part, that's one large container without a lot of fire breaks. It's a warehouse, it's your Lowe's, your Home Depot. A large commercial could be, take a retail strip center where you have multiple businesses in there. Yeah, the whole building is huge, but they're compartmentalized, and we can treat them as kind of separate businesses or separate compartments for our fire attack.
Right.
Well, these big boxes though, they're so massive, and you've got this open area across the entire thing for smoke movement and for air to fuel that fire. There's really no chance in a big box of a vent limited fire. There's just, still raining lieutenants. There's just so much space in a big box for that to take place. One other thing on your large commercial and big box for that matter, we do have to consider, because of the size of these structures and what most of them are doing in their business, the Charlie side of these are going to be really, really important. Statistically, that's probably your highest chance of where your fires are going to be. It's going to be your greatest forcible entry issue as well. And as we all pile up on the alpha side, that's the side we have the hardest time seeing. So assigning crews early to the Charlie, really important, but also that very well may be where fire attack is going to take place, just because that's where the biggest fire load and fuel load is available to you. One other thing on that is a declaration of an alpha side. When you run into some of these buildings that are full city blocks in size, we just need to have an alpha, and the rest of us can play off of that as we go. But early on designation of what alpha is on those really, really helps on all tactical considerations and accountability.
Right. Yeah, and think about most of your strip centers that have restaurants in them. Cooking equipment, all on the Charlie side 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So. And now, so we've talked about backup line deployment. So now what everyone really wants to talk about is red lines. So let's kind of visit about the red line and what is its purpose at this point.
Absolutely. The red line, incredibly valuable tool. We all know that. But we also need to know time and a place and what it's for. And we also need to understand a little bit about what the actual hydraulics are for our red line. It's 3/4 inch red line. It's a very small hose line, tremendous amount of friction loss. We have nozzles on there capable of 75 gallons a minute, but our pump discharge pressure would need to be about 900 to get that. In reality, when we're running our red line at 200, we're getting about 20 gallons a minute. And we do a lot with that. We really do, but we have to be smart about it. We can continue to use it the right way, and it can be a valuable tool for us, though, if we continue to use it the right way.
Let's talk about red lines and car fires.
Okay. So car fires, in there, we talk about car fires. One of the big things is there an exposure problem?
Yes.
If we have an exposure problem, the red line is not the right tool for you. The red line can be valuable in a car fire because you're not going to run the tank dry on this. But if we have something up against a structure, other vehicles, now we run into a problem of way too small gallons per minute, and we need to get a good knockdown. So we need to consider our bumper line or pulling a cross lay. At that point, maybe you do need a water supply or an additional engine to come give you their tank water as well. Yeah. But a standalone vehicle fire with no exposures, a red line can be a valuable tool for you. But otherwise, with an exposure problem, we need something bigger.
Right. So talking about EVs in parking garages, what's the recommended hose for that?
We still big booster right now. We can run that off of a standpipe, an external standpipe. We can hoist that up. You'll see a term coming out in the mid-rise policy when it comes out called pulling a short.
Yes.
And that's essentially pulling a pre-connected attack line from a truck up to a floor from the exterior. That could be a tactic for sure on a parking garage fire that we want to practice and understand the use of that. But yeah, the potential there and what we're seeing nationally on these EV fires, certainly in parking garages, we have to have at least 175 gallons a minute, if not more.
Correct.
On those. You may even on some, we may revert to the actual high-rise SOP where we're pulling 2.5 if it's a big enough parking garage, you're high enough up on that building where a 2.5 may be what you need for it.
Absolutely.
But certainly not the red line. That's not the right tool for that one.
Correct. And currently the mid-rise SOP is being written by Captain Bryant out of Station 8, and that should be available hopefully in the next couple months, and we'll start training on that. And now let's talk about red lines and structure fires.
Okay. The SOP has a decent list on there of when the red line is appropriate. For starters, it kind of goes along with 2 in, 2 out. If I have to put my SCBA on to go in, then the red line's not the tool for me. If I'm putting my air pack on because it's that smoky, we need to pull a big booster. That's our recommended attack line for structure fires, small structure fires, residential fires. So if you put on your air pack, you're pulling a booster. We can start there. One of the other things you can do with it though is after fire under control. If you have a declaration of fire under control and you're moving into that overhaul phase, the red line's a great tool for that.
Yes.
It's fantastic for that, where we can go in and hit hot spots, very maneuverable. We're not running the tank dry like we will with our higher GPMs. We're not doing a lot of property damage with low GPMs. That's what it's there for, but not until fire under control.
Right.
Fire under control, that is a benchmark that we're saying the forward progress of this fire has stopped. We've got this thing under control. And the red line then can be a valuable tool, but not before.
I hope this clears up any questions that you had over the new SOP. And if you have any other questions, please contact your battalion chiefs for any other advice or instructions over hose line deployment.